Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's Thursday, and it is time for What's the Point? So I love how my name is Tennille Hooklin, by the way, and I'm just so glad that you're coming in and listening, and welcome and welcome. And I just was going to say, I love it that what's the point? So much of what we do is try to understand and navigate through a mountain of research and trying to figure out what is the right way, what is that way, how do we bring in this and that. And so what I do is I look at everything from, first and foremost, a health perspective, and then I come into a performance. So health is the foundation of performance. And if we are in great health, then we can perform to our best, and whatever that might look like. It might be a performance best just for you. It might be actually really hitting some hard efforts in which you want to get to a podium. Who knows what it might be, but it is all about that. And that is what we'll be talking about today, and thinking about periodized nutrition. So what is, when we talk about periodized, what does that even mean? So when I say periodized, or when coaches talk about periodized, we know about periodization in terms of an annual training plan. And we think about a year. If an athlete has an objective, whether it be an event objective, or it could be a body composition objective, it could be whatever is your goal, we can look at it in terms of okay, how do we take this on in the course of whatever the time frame that we want to have. So for athletes, like I said, it's usually called an annual training plan. And we actually can break it out into, if you were in those younger years, we would break it into 4-year cycles, because that's aligned with the Olympics and yada, yada, yada. But let's just say it's in a year. And we're going to break it into a macro cycle, a mesocycle, and a microcycle. So when we think specifically and say something like periodized nutrition, we commonly are meaning that our nutrition is aligned with how we are viewing the training block and the period of time of the year, with that, how they're totally aligned with each other. So for example, in a base season, so coming out of a race season into transition into the winter for most people in North America, you would be thinking about, all right, I'm not doing as much activity. I'm doing more low aerobic. I'm giving my body a break. And how is it that I need to shift my nutrition to align with that period? And so it goes as you go into, Zwift season. If you love to be on Zwift, then we think about how do we support our body in that intensity and that work. And then we get ready, we maybe shift again, take a tiny bit of a break, come back, do a bit of base work, get ready for a summer season of being outside and having a great time. Another way to think about it is, I have some athletes that are doing a lot of cycling and road racing right now, but then they're going to go into some more endurance gravel races in the later part of the summer. So right now we are really focused on building up to having a lot of really quick ability, really a lot of glycolytic capacity, for example, because they're going to be doing sprints. This is in the cyclists that I am working with. But then we actually need to transition, and we need to start to think about how is it that we can support our how do our nutritional strategies support the differential training strategies that we undertake. And so that's what periodized nutrition is really talking about. And I want to say that no matter what we do, I think that there's some basics that we want to consider in our nutritional strategies. And that is things like, how is our body responding in health? What is our metabolic? What are the important pieces, no matter what phase you're at, or stage you're at, or whatever you're preparing for, how is it that we are staying in health? And the key points to that are, because it's going to be plural, is low energy availability. Keeping out low energy availability, ensuring that you're fueling for your training and giving your body the nourishment it needs to be at its best. We think about blood glucose, and particularly not blood glucose, but that insulin response. We want to think about how is it that we're asking our body to continuously respond to what we are nourishing with. And that comes into, okay, like, where do I have a balance? Like, am I thinking about the big picture, or is it that I'm always, I know this is a super topic that you love. So how is it that I'm continuously coming into a place that is keeping me from going too much one way? Like, I'm always spiking insulin, or I'm always eating. That is always spiking. One of the things that we've been talking about in the body composition group that I lead is like, how many times do we actually eat during the day? And is that because we need it? Is that because is it an emotional thing? Is it because we are trying to prepare for fuel for one activity after another? Like, what is it? And becoming really purposeful and intentional about that. So there's this underlying thing about, how is it that we're fueling or nourishing for health, and then how does that level of performance come in? And while they complement each other, they certainly are a little bit different. And I want to just share, it's been really cool. I've been working, I'm always working, but it really coming into and utilizing inside for a couple of athletes that are performance oriented, and wanting to really understand, okay, how do I fuel for my training? And specifically, how do I know that I'm getting enough? And these are two very different athletes. One of them, like I mentioned earlier, the one I'm thinking about is she is about to take on a 4-day stage race. Actually, it's over 3 days and there's 4 stages. And the other one is taking on a really big gravel race. And so huge endurance, and then a lot of sparky crit style racing scenarios. And what's fascinating is in my training of my athlete that is doing the 4 stages in the 3-day cycling race, is that we really wanted to create the ability for her to close the race. She has a motor like nobody else, like she's got the motor, she can stick with the groove. But what she wasn't able to do is really come and close and sprint and finish with that really strong finish that requires a whole big push. And so we've been working all winter on getting that power, that sprint power up, and her body has entirely responded to that. So her ability to burn fat has actually lowered a little bit, and her ability to hit into that glycolytic system has increased, meaning that she is able to really access those carbohydrates quickly. What does that mean then? And this is what becomes fascinating, is that when we train and how we support that training with our nutrition, it also has to key into, okay, so how is it that we need to thus change some of the fueling strategies to stay nourished, to stay in health, to keep up? And it's just looking at things a little bit differently. Whereas this other athlete who has gone really endurance, it was really key to start thinking about, all right, how is it that we are going to ensure that she really continues to burn like the fatty acids? Like, we want to be able to ensure that we're not losing that ability through high intensity training. And this is what becomes super cool, is this push and this pull between the training strategies and the nutritional strategies that we have. And if this seems like, it's like, yeah, but I'm not that serious. I just want to go and have some fun. What's interesting about this, for all of you that they're just like, I just want to go out and do it, is that it still matters. It still matters how we fuel. It still matters how we're nourishing our body. and how we are supporting the metabolic health of our, like at the very core of our being, of our cellular structure, the mitochondria. And we have a ton of evidence on how to do this. And we now have a lot of amazing tools that we can use, but we want to make sure that it continuously stays grounded in your body. It stays grounded in what you need, because all the guidelines in the world are still not going to be able to determine what your metabolic health is at, where you are at in terms of, I am I just will start burning carbohydrates right away. You could be male or female, it doesn't matter. You could be somebody who is right going into those carbohydrates, and we want to bring in that ability to burn more fat at low intensity aerobic exercise rather than going straight to carbohydrates. And so understanding what that looks like, understanding how our training and the fueling for that training interact, comes down to a health issue as well. And once we have that, then we can start saying, all right, now we know that we can go the distance. Now we know that we can respond with our body and respond with the way that our body wants to use the substrates. Like, let me tell you, if you, I can assure you that if you ask me to sprint, I'll be like, yeah, no. Like, that is not just something I like to do. I really mentally have to get my head out of, like, there's a lot of mindset things. I just don't enjoy the sprint. But that's partly because I'm not trained up for it. It's partly because it's like, oh, like I've got to bring myself into that. I'm just such an endurance athlete. But as I'm learning and as I'm engaging myself, and I'm actually starting to have more of a sprint, it's exciting because I'm having to really, focus on that heavy lifting, which I'm doing. I'm really focusing on ensuring that, we do this sprint interval training and that we have some of those really strong stimulus. How do I fuel for that? Again, it always is in pair. We can't separate the two. So to summarize, if you have any questions, by the way, just put them in the chat. But to summarize, I think that when we think about our nutrition and our weekly nutrition, because that's, for most people, it's that right now. It's, how do I think about that? Or maybe for some of you, it might be, well, I'm actually about to race. Is there something I can do? How do I, like, this idea of race weight? What is that? And we deal with it all. I am absolutely helping an athlete get down to race weight in a safe way. Why? Because this is, if that's the athlete's goal, I'm going to support that athlete and say, okay, so how are we going to support that strategy and what works, and how do we maintain the muscle mass? So what I want to say is, in your weekly approach, think about what your goals are. Think about what it is you want to have. And we can think about it in a week, and then we can expand out, and then we can expand out. Because when it comes to, say, your goal is body composition, there are sometimes a strategy, and I have just provided a strategy to another athlete. I said, okay, this is for right now. Then we're going to shift it. This is for right now to switch things in your body. And we want to really track and follow this carefully so that we can ensure that you are doing it in a healthful way and still having fun in your training, still showing up big in your family life, showing up big in your work in the way that you want to, because there's nothing more important than being connected to the things that we love. So I hope that is helpful in terms of thinking about how things shift for our training, how things shift for our weeks. And that, in essence, it's truly periodized training. Hope it helps. Leave me a question if you want.